Hi everyone, a blessed day to all of you. I'm praying that all of you are doing well in your studies. Always keep safe. Huwag yung pasyal ng pasyal kung saan-saan ha. Kaya nga wala tayong face-to-face para less ang contact with people. Okay, that is just a few reminders before we will proceed to our topic this week. Actually, our topic this week is just a continuation of our topic last week, where we talked about the legal aspects of nursing. So some of the concepts actually had been discussed last week. Okay, so today's discussion, we will tackle the following topics: areas of potential liability in nursing, legal protection in nursing practice, fields of opportunities in nursing, and the patient's bill of rights. Okay, let us discuss first the potential liability of nursing. So, nursing liability is actually or usually involved with tort law. And as a nurse or as a nursing student, it is very important for you to know the difference between professional negligence, unintentional, and intentional torts. Wherein here, under your potential liability, we will talk about crimes and torts. And under this, we have unintentional torts and intentional. Then, we will talk about the privacy of clients' health information, social media, loss of client property, and unprofessional conduct. So, let us discuss each of these topics. So, as I mentioned, these terms have been discussed in our previous discussion. But this week, this will just be a form of review so that for you to understand it more. And may mga other concepts and examples then in this week's discussion. So, we will talk about crime and torts first. So, crime is an act committed in violation of public or criminal law. And usually, it is punishable by fine or imprisonment. When we say fine, you have to pay something, no, in a certain amount. Depende kung anong klaseng crime. Or it could be, you can be imprisoned. Okay, pwede kayong makulong for a certain period of time. And under your crime, again, meron na tayong discussed before, the felonies, manslaughter, and misdemeanor. So, just to give you another example, felony, again, is a crime of a serious nature. So, usually, ito yung pinakaseryoso talaga. An example is murder. Okay? And then, manslaughter. So, wherein, example dito is the nurse accidentally gives an additional illegal dose of narcotics. Or, pwedeng instead na yung medication is through halimbawa, yung potassium, no? Potassium chloride, wherein before, nagkaroon ng case ng estudyante ang nagbigay sa isang hospital. Okay? Wherein, nangyari ito, instead na yung medication na yon is through IV infusion, ibig sabihin, i-incorporate siya sa IV para slowly ang pagpasok doon sa patient. You know naman what will happen to the client kapag potassium ibinigla mo yan. Through IV, diniretso sa vein. So, parang lethal injection yun. So, the baby, actually the patient that time was a baby. Within a few seconds, talagang namatay yung bata. Kasi potassium, mabilis So, mabilis ang pag-ano ng heart, nagkaroon ng problem. Okay? And then, misdemeanor. So, it is an offense of less serious nature. So, hindi siya ganun, unlike sa felony natin. But, the punishment could be fine, again, or you have to pay something. Depende kung ano ang damages, kung ano ang crime na na-commit. Or, you could be imprisoned. Okay, short-term jail. And let's move on to torts. Okay. Again, torts is a civil wrong committed against a person or person's property. So, no, hindi lang person, pati property. It could be unintentional and intentional. Pag sinabi natin unintentional, it is a negligence or professional negligence wherein nang it happens during your practice. So, hindi siya sinadya, but it caused harm to the person or your patient. And under that, we have negligence and gross negligence under your unintentional tort. When we say negligence, it is a misconduct or a practice that is below the standard expected of an ordinary, reasonable, and prudent person. So, halimbawa, ito yung dapat na standard. Ito dapat yung gagawin na ipe-perform to a client. Wherein, hindi mo na i-perform and it cause harm to the client. Pwedeng ikinalala ng sitwasyon ni patient or ikinamatay ng pasyente. Example lang, no? Halimbawa lang tulad ng oral care natin. Halimbawa dun sa oral care, tatanga-tanga ka, ginagawa mo, hindi mo chinek kung may loose teeth ba, may dentures ba si client, okay? So habang piniperform yung oral care, natanggal yung loose teeth ni client, pumasok doon sa client, na-choke yung pasyente, hindi nakahinga. Or nag-aspirate yung pasyente kasi instead na negative pressure yung iyong acetosyringe, nag-positive ka. Doon ka nag-insert mo yung nandito na positive saka ka nag-insert. So, naipasok yung water towards the client airway. Baka nagkaroon ng aspiration. And gross negligence, it involves extreme lack of knowledge, skills, or decision making that the person clearly should have known that might put someone or your patient into harm. So talagang ito yung kailangan, kulang ka talaga sa knowledge, wala ka talagang skill to perform a certain procedure, or hindi mo talaga dapat yan ginagawa dahil hindi yan ginagawa ng nurse. Okay. So, mali ang desisyon na binigay, that is gross negligence. And under your gross negligence, we have the malpractice. So, malpractice is a professional negligence, that is, negligence that occur while the person was performing as professional. So, habang ginagawa mo. But, malpractice can be considered if nag-ano siya. So, pumasok siya under the 6 elements. Okay. Or na-commit niya under the following elements. We have the duty, okay, breach of duty, foreseeability, causation, harm, or injury, or damages. So, duty. When we say duty, you know that as a nurse, you are responsible, no? Diba? You are responsible to have a relationship. What kind of relationship? Nurse-patient relationship with your client. And you know that your duty as a nurse is to provide care to the client. Ano ba ang care na kailangan ng client? Medical care, nursing care, yan yung mga duty mo to the client. And you have, that is your general duty to care for your client. Ano ba yung mga care? Ano ba yung mga nursing care na ginagawa natin? To give the medication on time. Okay? To perform the nursing procedure. Like, for example, yung mga ginagawa natin, monitoring IV therapy, monitoring the INO of the patient, yung needs ni client, yan, you have to provide. And then the breach of duty. Okay? You have to know that as a nurse, meron tayong standard of care na dapat we have to follow in a specific situation. So, kapag yung standard of care na yun, hindi mo nagawa, ito ang dapat nagawa, or may ginawa ka na hindi dapat. So, that is breach of duty. Okay? So you have to know, diba, as a nurse, meron tayong nursing standards that is actually published or inaral natin, that you have to follow that when you perform a certain procedure or when you are giving or providing a nursing care. So kapag hindi mo ginawa yun, yung mga standards na yun, and that is breach of duty. And foreseeability, so what is that? Sabi dito, there must be a link between the Nurses Act and the injured suffered. Yun yung foreseeability. So, ibig sabihin, may link, no? May link. Medyo naisip mo to, yung Nursing Act mo. Ito yung ginagawa mo. Ito yung piniperform mo. Na kapag ito yung ginawa mo, it might lead to more injury to the client. Ano ba yung mga possible na injury sa client? Sobrang busy mo, hindi mo na itaas yung side rails ni patient. Knowing that your patient has, palagay natin, may mental problem or unconscious yung client. Okay? Eh baka biglang gumalaw yung client, hindi mo na itaas or child yung client. Hindi mo na itaas yung side rails, ayan, possible na ma-injure, magkaroon ng injury doon sa client. Okay? And the causation. Okay. Causation, it must be proved now that the harm occurred as a direct result of the nurse's failure to follow the standard of care, and that the nurse could have or should have known that the failure to follow the standards could result in such a harm, diba? So, dapat alam mo to na ito yung mangyayari kapag hindi mo nagawa yung standard of care. Okay. So, ano-ano ba ang mga standard of care natin? Diba? Doon sa ating providing of in performing certain procedure. For example, sa wound care. Okay, so wala pa kayo doon sa wound care na yun. So, merong certain procedure na dapat mong gagawin, di ba? Kahit dyan sa iba nating ginagawa, di ba? May cleanest to dirtiest, di ba? Nililinis natin yung, kahit sa vital signs taking lang, nililinis nyo yung thermometer. Bakit? Kasi, possible, magkaroon ng infection or nag-hand washing kayo before you perform a procedure because you are protecting the client. That might cause further infection to the client. So, it could harm your client. Okay? Or, katulad na lang din ng iba nating oral care ulit, no? Example, or shaving na lang tayo o na-injure mo si patient, nasugatan mo. Okay? And then, damages. Okay. When we say damages, if professional negligence caused the injury, the nurse is held liable for damages. Okay? That may be compensated. So, magbabayad ka, no? To the client or to the party na affected. Okay? So, these are just some categories of negligence that result in professional negligence lawsuits. Okay. Ito lang, nasa book dito nyo to. Failure to follow the standards of care. So, under din ito noong 6 elements natin kanina. So, hindi mo finalo yung standard of care for the client. Ano pa ba mga standard of care? Halimbawa, naging operating room nurse ka. Okay? So, ang standard of care natin is dapat ma-maintain natin yung sterility. Walang break of sterility. Ibig sabihin, ma-maintain natin yung sterility ng open items. Ina-break mo yung standard. Na-touch mo yun or na-unsterile mo yung items na yun that lead to infection to the client later on. So, that is failure to follow standards of care. Failure to use equipment in responsible manner. That is very self-explanatory. So, sumabog ang equipment dyan dahil hindi mo inalagaan ng maayos or ginamit ng maayos. Failure to communicate. Ano tong failure to communicate? Kanino ka ba makikipag-communicate? You have to communicate with the client. You assess your client and what is your assessment or the progress of your client, you have to remember that you, the nurse, was with the patient for around 8 to 12 hours, depende sa shift mo. So, you are with the client. Diba, nursing or nurses ang nandoon sa client. Ikaw yung directly na nakakita ng progress ni client or problem ni client. You have to communicate that to the doctor. Kasi baka mamaya, nagbigay ang doktor ng ganitong gamot, antibiotic. Although prior to giving the antibiotic, nag-skin test, nakita naman walang allergy si patient. But then, nung binigay na kay patient, nag-cause pala ng allergy sa client. So, you have to report that to the doctor. Baka hinayaan mo, wala yan, kati-kati lang yan. Mamaya-mamaya, hindi na nakahinga yung pasyente. Okay, failure to document. Whatever you do, or what are the procedures, or anything you did to your client, you have to have a proper documentation. Because, what is not written is not done. Okay? Failure to assess and monitor. So, as I mentioned kanina, ikaw yung with the client for how many hours? And ginawa mo lang pala, mag-check lang, magpainom lang ng gamot. Hindi mo malang ina-assess yung client. Yung pasyente, halimbawa, post-surgery, na-assess mo nga, kinuha mo nga yung vital signs, hindi mo naman inisip ano ba yung interpretation ng vital signs niya. Bakit parang bumababa ang blood pressure niya, humihina ang pulse rate niya? You have to assess, you have to monitor, lalo na kapag yung patient mo, nasa ward ka, post-surgery yung client, kaya nga dapat i-monitor mo yun every 15 minutes. Sobrang busy mo ka mo. Sabi ng doktor, every 15 minutes, ang dami kong pasyente. So, 1 hour na bago mo nabalikan si client. You have to remember that the patient after surgery, mahigpit yun. Dapat titingnan mo yun every 15 minutes. Tapos, pag nalipas na yung period na yun, pag sinabi ng doktor, okay, every 1 hour na, you have to do that. Kasi, pwede kasing, kaya every 15 minutes pwede kasing magkaroon ng bleeding si patient that might lead to shock and definitely death of the client. Okay? Failure to act as a client advocate. So, di ba, ikaw yung support ni client. You have to be with the client, especially in the decision making. Of course, you will not decide for the client, but you have to help the client you have to guide the client, di ba? Ikaw yung magbigay ng information sa client kung bakit kailangan to or bakit ganyan and blah blah blah. And we now move on to intentional torts. So, na-mention ko na rin to before. Okay? So, under your intentional torts, we have assault, battery, false imprisonment, invasion of privacy, and defamation. So, let us discuss each of those. So, assault is an attempt or threat to attach another person unjustifiably. Ito pala, tandaan nyo kapag nasa area na kayo, di ba? Lalo na pag may bata, ayaw magpa-injection, di ba? Tendency, inaano mo, sige, ayaw mo, ito, anuin kita, yan ay assault yan. Okay? Sige, pasaway ka, ito, tutusukin kita. Yan, assault yan. Battery is the willful touching of a person or person's clothes or even something the person is carrying that may or may not cause harm. Halimbawa, ayaw ni patient na magpa-vital signs take. Ayoko, yung pinili ko, akin na yung kamay mo. Ayan. Or akin na yung kamay mo, injection na kita. Battery din yan. Pero actually, sa mga bata, ginagawa rin yan talaga sa, sa pag ayaw magpa-inject yung bata. Okay? Let me show you this video clip. An example of your assault and battery. Okay?
Mommy.
Well, good morning, Miss Johnson. I'm Lisa. I'm going to be your R&D started on you, okay? Okay. What's your birth date? 1/15/38. Okay. I'm going to take a look at what you've got here. Let me see your arm. Miss Johnson? No, we don't have time for this. I'm a very busy person. Give me your arm. I'm just going to pull it over. No, you're hurting me. I don't care. We need to get this done. But, no. No. It's for your own good. Mm-mm. This gosh darn thing. I'm bored. Where is that nurse anyway? I've called her 2 times already. She still hasn't come in. Miss Johnson, can I help you? I'm very busy today. There you are. I have been waiting for you to come in here. I wanted to ask you some questions. What do you need? What's the weather like outside? The weather's very nice. Is there something I can help you with? I need to get to work. I have many patients. Did you get your kids something nice for Easter? Easter's next weekend. Well, didn't you get them anything? I don't have time for this nonsense. Well, how about you give me a glass of water? You have water right here, Miss Johnson. But there's no ice cubes in it. I don't have time for this. I need to get to work. You drink that water, and if you page me again, you're not going to get any water. Good morning, Mrs. Smith. How are you? My name is Lindsay. I'm an RN here, and I don't want a nurse. I need to take your vitals. I don't want anybody taking my vitals. I really have to. I don't want you touching me. I just need to take your pulse, Mrs. Smith. No, that's all you touch me. Don't touch me. We gotta make sure you're gonna be okay. I'm fine. But I don't want you touching me. I don't want you touching me. Excuse me, it'll only take a second. If you touch me, I'm gonna throw this glass at you. Okay, alright, I'll do it. Okay, you know what? I'll let you calm down, and I will come back in a few minutes. I'll be right back. Good morning, Mr. Brown. How are you today?
Hello there.
My name's Lindsay. I'm an RN here. I just need to get some heart sounds from you, okay?
That would be great.
Why don't you just sit right there? No, that's not appropriate, Mr. Brown. Just lay right there. I need to get some sounds from you. Okay. All right. How about I come back later? All right?
Sounds good.
So, I hope you understand that video presentation. So, kitang-kita naman dun sa video presentation kung ano doon yung assault and battery. So, ano yung pinaka-gusto nyo doon? Yung last? Okay. Okay, so alam nyo na yung difference between assault, diba, yung parang babantaan mo pa lang siya. And then battery, meron ng touching. Okay? So, let us move to another topic under your areas of potential liability, the false imprisonment. So, it is defined as unjustifiable detention of a person without legal warrant to confine a person. Okay. So ibig sabihin lang nun, ipipilit mo pa bang hindi mo gusto na umuwi ng patient. Gusto na, example nito, gusto na umuwi ni patient. Ipinipilit, hindi ka pwedeng umuwi. Kailangan mo pa dito. Kailangan mo pang magstay sa hospital. Baka meron namang reason ang pasyente. So, pwede mo silang ipasign ng AWA or against. AWA is against or absence without authority. Sorry, AWA is absence without authority and or AMA against medical advice. Ito yung gusto na talagang umuwi ni patient, no? Imbis na meron pa talagang dapat gagawin, meron pang procedures or hindi pa galon kagaling si pasyente, but the patient insists to go home. Dahil probably, hindi na nila kaya ang hospital bills. Okay? So, uuwi sila. So, there is a form wherein ipapasign sila ng against medical advice. And, number 4 is your invasion of privacy. Could be a direct wrong of a personal nature. Okay. So, invasion of privacy has 4 types of invasion. The first one is the use of client's name of likeness for profit without consent. So, ginamit mo yung pangalan niya. Unreasonable intrusion, public disclosure of private facts, diba? Putting a person in a false light. Yan yun. Mga example of your or types of your invasion of privacy. So here is an example of invasion of privacy. I'm sorry, that video clip shows about example of false imprisonment, and the next video is about invasion of privacy.
Polly and her fellow nursing students love to spend time with Eliza.
You're better than the best.
Eliza loved to share her stories about the good old days, and the nursing students loved to hear them.
That's right. Completely unaware. Nothing can compare where you send me.
The students loved to care for Eliza, and they eventually all got their own quality time with her.
Moments when my good times start to fade. You make me smile like the sun fall out of bed and say,
Eliza was progressively getting worse, and as Amy read to her, she realized that Eliza was going to die.
you make me dance like a fool, forget how to breathe.
Polly's sister worked as a carrier at the nursing home, and sadly, she watched Eliza slowly pass away.
Oh, you make me smile.
Knowing Polly was left out of the group, her sister decided to tell her Eliza had passed via text. Polly passed this information along, knowing her fellow nursing students would be upset as well.
I don't have answers, and neither you. I know the pain of a heartbreak, yeah.
Some of the students reacted numbly to this information. Some of the students would cry in bed all day long.
Jesus, too young here, then confusion in the dark.
The other students thought it may be therapeutic to write in their journal about how they're feeling and what's on their mind.
So, what can you say about the video that I showed to you about confidentiality? Diba, sometimes iniisip natin yung ganong ginagawa natin is just, akala mo, normal lang na gagawin mo yun, na walang mali doon. But, still, you are, that is a breach of confidentiality of the client. Okay? So, ito, unreasonable intrusion. Ang example nito is example, you are providing a care to a client, and then some of the nursing students are taking pictures, no, habang nagba-vital signs or merong ginawang certain procedure to the client, nagpipicture taking kayo without the client's consent. Okay. And then public disclosure of private facts. You give the information to a certain individual na wala namang legitimate reason or purpose of getting the information. And putting a person in a false light. Example nito is you are publishing an information about the client that might be offensive to the client. Okay? So, another under your areas of, or another liability is the defamation. So, it is a communication that is false or made with a careless disregard for truth and results in injury to the reputation of a person. And it could be in a form of libel and slander. So, when you say libel, print, pictures, writing, so, yun yung libel, siniraan mo ang isang tao. And slander or the spoken words. So, I have here another video clips for that.
So did you hear about Kathy, that 66-year-old next door? What about her? That she has like 4 STDs. Oh my god, are you serious?
Kathy, she's a nice lady. I know her. I like to go with her.
We're not talking here.
Kathy, you're at 3 STDs.
I don't know why he would listen to this.
Kathy!
I feel like we should tell someone about this, like a 66-year-old with 3 STDs.
I know. Don't talk about Kathy.
Brooke, she's coming out of here. Shut up!
But Kathy's a nice lady.
Shut up!
There you go.
Alright.
So again, what can you say about that video clip? What kind of, or what form of defamation is that? Is it slander or libel? Okay? And then, let us now proceed to legal protections in nursing practice. So, under your legal protection in nursing practice, so there are actually laws and strategies that are placed to protect the nurse against litigation. So, again, it is the nurse's responsibility to seek clarification to erroneous orders from the prescriber, lalo na, or kapag meron kayong na-encounter na mga doctor's order, kasi that is an example of common errors, okay, under your legal protection in nursing practice. So, under this, dahil nga meron silang ginawa ng strategies or laws to protect the nurse while performing a certain nursing care, we have here the Good Samaritan Acts. So, paano ba yung Good Samaritan Acts? These are the laws that protect the healthcare provider who provide assistance at the scene of an emergency against claims of professional negligence. So, ano ba yun? Halimbawa, nagkaroon ng biglaang habang on your way, di ba? On your way. Sa LRT ka, may nakita kang aksidente doon, bigla kang tumulong. Tapos meron palang ibang nanonood na yung ginawa mo daw is not the right way. Instead na gumaling kasi yung pasyente, may mas nangyari doon sa pasyente. Okay, so this is under your Good Samaritan. So, ibig sabihin lang nito, another example actually that was given in your book is yung merong child na nagkaroon ng aksidente, no? May isang bata na merong problem or nagkaroon ng isang aksidente wherein kasi na-strike yung or nasagasaan yung bata on the side of the road kasi yung nurse, imbis nandun yung nurse para tulungan yung bata ng maliit na injury, kailang sabi niya, ay, may kailangan akong tawagin. Tapos biglang iniwan yung bata. Ayun pala, mas nasagasaan. Ibig sabihin lang nitong Good Samaritan Acts, imbis na tumulong ka, pero nagkaroon ng mas malala pang injury or aksidente doon sa client. So, instead na tumulong ka, nagkaroon patuloy, ikaw pa yung nasisi doon sa pangyayari. So, kaya ginawa itong Good Samaritan Acts to protect the nurse against specific situation. So the guidelines for nurses who choose to render emergency care are as the follows, no? If you really want to help during emergency situation, you must know the following guidelines. First, you have to limit your actions to those normally considered first aid if possible. So you should know what are the first aid. Ano ba yung mga first aid na dapat mong gawin? Or do not perform actions that you do not know how to do. O baka mamaya mag-perform ka dyan ng CPR, mali pala yung CPR na ginawa mo. Nursing students ako, magsi-CPR ako, tas mali pala. Offer assistance but do not insist. Huwag mong ipilit. Have someone call for additional help dahil hindi lang naman ikaw talaga. You can ask somebody to call for ambulance or additional help. Do not leave scene until the injured person leaves or another qualified person takes over. Baka sinimulan mo tapos hindi mo tinapos, umalis ka na. That ikaw pa rin ang masisinod. Do not accept any compensation. Okay, so kang tatanggap kapag you are helping during emergency situation. And then under naman dito sa legal protection of nurses, you have the Good Samaritan Act and then the Professional Liability Insurance. Okay, this professional liability insurance, it covers all costs incurred by the nurse up to the face value of policy. However, the insurance company may have the right to make the decision about the claim and settlement. So the common claims that professional liability insurance covers are negligence, misinterpretation, and under this professional liability insurance, a primary care provider or a hospital can be sued because of the negligence conduct of a nurse. And the nurse can also be held liable for professional negligence. That's why ang ibang mga hospitals or organization, meron talaga silang binibigay na professional liability insurance. Kasi pag nakomit ng isang nurse ang negligence, hindi lang kasi ang makakasuhan the nurse, also the organization or the hospital itself. And then, pwede rin silang magbayad doon sa nakomit na negligence ni nurse. But then, it is also very important daw na kapag you are a nurse or you're applying dito sa Pilipinas, I'm not so sure, but ewan ko sa ibang bansa, meron talaga, dapat daw chine-check mo talaga if you have the professional liability insurance. Dapat automatic na meron. Or in other institution, talagang binabayaran din ng nurses itong insurance na to. Okay? Actually, sa ibang bansa din, not only for the nurses, also for the students and faculty. Kasi hindi naman lahat lang ng nurses ang nagkakaroon ng negligence. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, I never heard about it. So, what we do, para maiwasan ng negligence, is of course, we will instruct our student to do not perform anything without your CI. So, wala kang gagalaw, hindi ka gagalaw without your CI. Okay? Without your clinical instructor, especially if you are already in your hospital exposure or in the community or you are in the clinical settings. Okay? So, hindi ka dapat mag-perform ng any procedure kapag wala ang clinical instructor. Hospitals are known to countersue nurses when they find negligence and the hospital is required to pay. That's why nurses are advised to provide their own insurance coverage and not rely on hospital-provided insurance. So, dapat meron ka daw. And another, so you have the Good Samaritan Act, the professional liability insurance, and under this, you have your carrying out a physician's order. So, paano ba to? Mag-carry out ka ng doctor's order. So, when you carry out a doctor's order, or what is a doctor's order first? A doctor's or physician's order is an order conditioned upon occurrence of certain events of the patient. maybe it medical or non-medical. So, nurses are expected to analyze procedures and medications ordered by the physician. So, siguro iniisip ninyo, bakit pa namin pagdating nyo ng second year, you have your pharmacology or anatomy and physiology. Ang dami-daming subjects. Why do we need to understand? Why do we need to pass all these subjects? Siguro iniisip nyo yun. Again, because you are there to help your client. You will carry your nursing purpose. Ano nga ba yung purpose mo? Ito nga sinasabi dito is you have to analyze the procedure and medication. So, it is important that you have enough knowledge and skills. Diba? Also in pharmacology, in the anatomy, medical surgical of the client, the type of illness, the signs and symptoms, the possible diagnosis, the possible medication. So, dapat alam nyo yun. Kasi, again, kayo lang ang palaging kasama ni patient for 8 hours to 12 hours. Nurses ang palaging nandyan. The doctor will round for once a day. He will only or she will only spend 15 to 30 minutes with the client. Ikaw pa rin ang nakakakita ng progress. Ikaw pa rin ang nakakakita kung what happened to the client during your duty. So, you have to analyze, tama ba yung procedure na gagawin nito? Tama ba yung medication na binigay niya for the client? Okay. So, there are categories of orders that nurses must question to protect themselves legally. So, hindi naman in a nice way. Hindi naman yung maggagaling-galingan. Kaya nag-aral ako ng ganito. Bakit ganyan ginawa mo, Doc? Bakit ganyan? In a nice way, of course. You have to communicate. You have to be, you have to have a good communication skills, especially with the doctor. Ano ba mga questions na to? You have to questions any order a client questions or questions any order a client questions. The nurse should be So the nurse should be attentive to what the patient is saying. Okay, and should always recheck the order before giving medication. Ano ba yung sinasabi ni client? Diba, baka nag-complain siya. Sabi niya, alam mo nurse, nung ininom ko yan, nahihilo ako. Or nurse, nangati ako. So you have to pay attention. Diba? Nurse, normal lang po ba talaga na kapag uminom ako yan, hahapdi yung sikmura ko? You have to be attentive. And then questions any order if the client's condition has changed. Example, the nurse should be observant from time to time about the client's condition. Baka naman, dito, ano ba yun? Client's condition has changed. Baka nang binigyan siya ng example medication, like example, morphine. Baka, anong nangyari? Mas bumilis ba yung heartbeat niya or heart rate? Nahirapan ba siyang huminga? You have to ask the doctor, Doc, bakit po pagka ganito daw yung ininom niya? Or you can stop it kapag ganun na talaga, nahirap siyang huminga. Diba? And then you call the doctor. Hindi mo antayin yung, bukas pa magra-round si doctor. Baka mamaya bukas pa mag-round si doctor, pinagpatuloy mo yung pagbibigay ng medication, nagka-allergy na pala or meron na palang adverse reaction to the client, di ba? That's why, kailangan din aralin ninyo what are the adverse reaction. So, iba yung side effect. Ang side effect is acceptable pa yan. But adverse reaction could lead to harm or injury to the client. Pwedeng ikamatay. And questions and record verbal orders to avoid miscommunication. There are really times na, halimbawa, tinawagan mo si Doc, Doc, nagkaroon po ng allergy si patient, or Doc, ganito po ang complaint ni patient. Okay. And then, the doctor will order as a medication through phone or a laboratory through phone. So, you have to, what is your responsibility? So, the nurse's responsibility is to make sure that all documents are recorded. You have to record it. You have to write it. And they should read the orders to the primary care provider for confirmation. So, sinabi niya sa'yo yung order, uulitin mo, i-read mo sa kanya yung order. Pag sinabi ng doctor na tama yon, and then that's the time na isa-sign mo yon. Okay? And pwede mo rin ipa-countersign sa doctor yon once na nag-round siya. Questions any order that is illegible, unclear, or incomplete. Okay? The nurse should make sure that the client can clearly understand handwritten orders of the physician, such as drug or dose to be taken. Especially if, halimbawa, home medication na ito, pauwi na si client. So, ito yung doctor's order. Nag-iwan si doc ng reseta. So, hindi naman readable. Hindi naman nababasa ni patient. You have to, kahit ikaw hindi mo mabasa, you have to clear it with the doctor. Okay? So, documentation. So, documentation, ulit-ulit natin pinag-usapan kanina na kailangan natin i-document lahat. So, documentation is a client's medical chart, is a legal document that can be presented in court as evidence. So, just in case magkaroon ng problem at nagdemanda ang patient or relatives. In a trial, the effectiveness of a witness testimony can depend on the nurse's documentation of nursing care. That's why it is really very important that you document properly everything you did for the client. Failure to document properly can constitute negligence and be the basis for tort liability. So, insufficient assessment and documentation can hinder proper diagnosis and may result in worsening of the client's state. So, hindi lang doon sa kaso, di ba? Hindi lang para baka magkaroon ng kaso kaya ka nagsusulat. So, kung mali rin yung assessment mo, mali ang documentation mo, hindi maibigay ni doctor yung right diagnosis and the right treatment for the client. Imbes na gumaling si patient, nagkaroon pa ng worse ang kanyang situation. So, incident report. Okay, so incident report is an agency of record of an accident or unusual occurrence. So, incident reports are used to make all facts available to agency personnel to contribute to statistical data about incidents. Ano ba yung mga usual incidents na pinapagawa natin ng incidental report? Halimbawa, nalaglag si patient. Okay, nagkaroon ng fall during the hospitalization ni client. Okay, what happened exactly? You have to write an incidental report. Or nagkaroon ng gulo. Or nagkamali ng medication. Yan. So, the following tasks should be completed when doing an incident report. First is you have to identify the client by names, initials, and identification number. Give the date, the time, place of the incident. Describe the facts of the incident, and of course, avoid conclusions. Huwag kang mag-conclude ka agad na kaya nangyari yon. State the client's comments by using direct quotes. Identify all witnesses to the incident. Identify any equipment by number and any medication by name and dosage. Okay. So, another. Providing competent nursing care. So, under pa rin ang legal protection natin. So, competent practice is a major legal safeguard for nurses. So, ibig sabihin, you should be competent enough. You should have all the knowledge, the skills required being a nurse. It also involves care that protects the client from harm. For examples are anticipating sources of client injury, educating clients about hazards, and implementing ways to prevent injuries. So, in-anticipate mo na yung possible na mangyari ni client. Halimbawa, old age si client. Okay. So, kailangan educate mo rin yung client na possible. Kailangan pag pumunta siya ng CR, dapat may alalay siya kasi it might cause an injury. Meron kasing certain na example dito, yung grandfather of my husband. He was diagnosed with pneumonia, something like that. So, he was hospitalized. And during hospitalization, nakatulog yung bantay niya at nag-CR siya. So, nung nag-CR siya, ayun, nadula sa CR, nabilian ng ribs. Nabilian ng hips. So, diba? So, may pagkukulang din ang mga nurses doon. Alam naman nila that the patient is more than 80 years old. So, dapat na-instructionan mo, na-educate mo yung client na pag gusto niyo pong mag-CR, ha, gamit lang po kayo ng urinal, kasi lalaki yun, or bedpan. Kung sa gilid lang po at bawal pong pumunta sa CR, baka mahilo po kayo at madulas. So, dapat you have to educate your client. At yun, dahil nabalian siya, nagtuloy-tuloy na siya, wherein yun na yung ikinamatay niya. So, that's very sad, diba? So, that's why you need to educate your client. Implement ways to prevent injuries. Kaya, dapat tinataas mo yung side rails, and then you have to educate the client too na meron din kasi akong mga nabasang injuries no about side rails na mas tumaas ang incidence of fall because of using the side rails. Kasi sa ibang bansa ata yung report na nabasa ko about that, wherein hindi alam, kaya tumaas ang incident na kahit nagkaroon ng side rails up. Kasi what happened, nagta-climb up doon yung client. So, dapat, ini-educate nyo rin yung client kung bakit kailangan itaas ang side rails. At kung bababa, paano rin siya ibababa kung talagang kailangan bumaba ni client or may relatives. Kasi, mas nagkakaroon patuloy ng further injury that might lead to client's death. So, application of nursing process. So, that's why, ngayon pa lang, tinitrain na kayo how to apply nursing process. What are the steps? Because it is an essential part of providing safe and effective client care. So, it has an evidence already. All assessment must be documented accurately. Effective communication, showing of sincerity in providing care, and acknowledging when they do not know the answer to the client's question, protects the nurse from negligence claim. Okay. So, function within the scope of your education. Ito yung para maproteksyonan ka as a nurse, no? Ito yung mga additional lang. How to protect you as a nurse or even as a nursing student once you are in your duty already. So, function within the scope of your education. Ano ba yung scope ng education mo? Di ba, as a nurse, huwag kang mag-function ng parang doktor ka na, that you will provide you will prescribe a medication to your patient. You have to function. Ano ba ang level of education mo? Your job description. And you have to practice it under the Nursing Practice Act. Follow the policies and procedure of the employing agency. Ano ang mga policies nila? Build and maintain good rapport with client. Always check the identity of the client to make sure it is the right client. Especially if pinatawag na for medication or pinainom ng medication, baka magkamali ka ng pagbigay ng medication. So, ito yung common na medication error. Or inoperahan si pasyente, mali yung inoperahan. Imbis na right kidney yung tatanggalin, left kidney yung tatanggalin. Kasi nagkapalit ng pasyente. That's why, right kidney pa naman yung right kidney yung tatanggalin ni patient, yung left kidney niya is yun yung maayos, yun yung natanggal. So, nung ginawa mo, pinatay mo na si patient. So, that's why it is very important that you check if it is the right patient. Ano yung right patient, right procedure, right medication, right side, di ba? Kung for surgery ang client. Observe and monitor client accurately. So, i-observe mo si client, i-monitor mo yung progress ni client. I-assess mo mabuti si client, and then communicate and record significant changes in the client's condition to the primary care provider or to the client's physician. Promptly and accurately document all assessments and care given. So again, documentation is very important. Be alert when implementing nursing interventions and give each task your full attention and skill. So dapat hindi yung chika-chika ka dyan habang ginagawa mo. So, you have to be serious kasi you're dealing with life. Hindi yung chismis-chismis, pakyut ng pakyut lang habang nag-duty. Okay? So, perform procedures correctly and appropriately based on what you have learned. Make sure that the correct medications are given in the correct dose by the right route at the scheduled time and to the right client. When delegating nursing responsibilities, make sure that the person who is delegated a task understand what to do and that the person has the required knowledge and skills. Kapag dinelegate mo, ikaw ang gagawa nitong task na to, make sure that he or she is capable of performing a certain task and he understand or he know how to do it. Okay. Protects clients from injury. How will you protect the clients from injury? By educating your client, providing safety measures to the client. Okay, report all incidents involving clients. Always check any order that a client questions. Okay, i-check mo. Sabi ni client, parang hindi ito yung gamot na iniinom ko. Bakit may ganito akong gamot? Okay, you have to check that. Baka naman may mali nga. Know your own strengths and weaknesses. Ask for assistance and supervision in situation for which you feel inadequately prepared. Pag hindi mo talaga kaya, you can ask for help from your head nurses and others superior than you. You can ask questions. Maintain your clinical competence. Dapat na i-maintain mo yung clinical competence. How will you do that? Of course, update your knowledge. Magbasa, update yourself. For students, this demands study and practice before caring for the client. So, kapag mag-i-inject na kayo, mag-practice muna kayo. Okay, injection, no? How to do skin test, how to do intramuscular injection, how to perform IV. You have to practice that. Una, sa dummy or pwedeng sa... Kami dati sa injection, nagpa-practice kami sa kamatis, then before naman sa partner mo with the classmates, before doing it with the client. For graduate nurses, it means continued study to maintain and update clinical knowledge and skills. So, hindi porket graduate ka na, mag-stop ka na doon. You have to update yourself through seminars or through continuing education. Okay? So, let us now move on to our next topic for this week's discussion. The possible opportunities for nurses when they finish their degree. So, saan kayo pupunta? Pag natapos mo na ang 4-year course, ano yung mga opportunities out there? Okay. Legal consultant nurse. So, pwede kang legal consultant nurse. Their job is to help the lawyers understand the medical procedure and terminology. And also, at the same time, they are the ones who also help the lawyers review and gather data and evidences. It is challenging, di ba? They are also the ones who are authorized to view information that will help in the case like charts and records, etc. to check if malpractice was committed. Okay, so kita mo na. Sa documentation pa lang makikita mo kung nagkaroon ba ng malpractice doon, may mali ba. Okay, yan yung trabaho ng legal consultant nurse. Research nurse. Research nurse is the one responsible behind the medical treatments and even medication that people are receiving nowadays. So, tumutulong sila in doing the research. Ano bang magandang treatment? Ano ba yung mga medication na dapat na effective for a certain case? Emergency nurse. The job of the emergency nurse is considered to be one of the hardest jobs that the nurse may encounter, since they need good stamina and they need to be active, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally, since the lives of the people are in their hands. From the word emergency, so ito yung mga dying na yung patient, i-revive sa area. So talagang busy, takbuhan, ganoon ang emergency nurse. Okay, so yun yung parang kayo. Okay, na opportunity of nurse, yung emergency, napakataas ng stress level. Okay, oncology nurse. But by the way, sa emergency nurses, of course, it is also challenging for those who love challenge, diba? So, oncology nurse. Oncology nurse is the nurse responsible in assessing the health of the patients with cancer. So, mahirap din to, diba? Kasi, especially, yung patient is dying on the terminally ill na yung client, 'di ba? Parang ano din to, kailangan din you are not just physically fit but emotionally fit as well. They make sure that the cancer patient receives the proper care they need. Another opportunity, rehabilitation nurse. So rehabilitation nurse are the one who is responsible in rehabilitating and assisting patient who are or who have disability or chronic illness. They are the one who make sure that the patients can adapt the altered lifestyle. So, altered yung lifestyle. Kasi binabago yung lifestyle. Kasi nga for rehabilitation, parang gumaling yung patient. Okay? Community nurse. Community nurse is the one responsible in providing care in the community. The main job of these nurses is to make sure that the people who can't afford to go to the hospital to get the proper treatment that they need can receive or obtain the health care that they need. Okay, sino ba ang mga community nurse? Those are the ito yung mga nurses sa health center. Okay, so 'di ba ang job nila is to provide care to the client in the community, especially those who cannot afford for medical treatment. Kaso lang, ang dami ding mga nurses na ganyan na parang nawawala na rin yung kanilang value, yung kanilang character. Kasi yung iba nagiging very strict, dahil, syempre, sometimes mahirap din makipag-deal, lalo na maraming makukulit. Okay? So, maano rin talaga, mahirap rin So, again, sila yung mga nurses sa health center. Okay, so napakatataray nung iba or pinipili kung sino yung bibigyan nila. So, dapat maging fair kayo if you choose to be community nurse, and you should have more patience. Kasi alam nyo naman, community health nurse, ito yung nagwo-work sa barangay, nagwo-work sa isang community. So, expected mo na talaga na marami ang mahihirap dyan, marami ang makukulit, marami ang less educated. So, mas kailangan mo ng mas mahabang pasensya. Burn unit nurse. These are the nurse who work with people who have suffered burns, including the fire burns and acid burns. O, diba? Ang hirap din yan. Pharmaceutical nurse. This is an interesting field for nurses who no longer wish to work directly with the client or the patients. Working for pharmaceutical companies is a very interesting alternative too. Nurse lobbyist. The nurse will speak to congressmen and senators in hope of encouraging certain healthcare ideas to be legislated and receive funding. So, medyo challenging din to. So, lahat naman challenging, di ba? Disaster management and relief nurse. It provides healthcare to affected populations after a disaster. So, those are just example of opportunities. There are more. You can be a military nurse wherein you will be working in the military hospital. Or meron akong friend na military nurse siya, kasama siya kapag lumilipad ang C-130, di ba? Pag halimbawa, pupunta sila sa Mindanao para kumuha ng mga patients, kasama siya doon. So, there are more opportunities. Yung akin naman before is, I was an operating room nurse, not only operating room nurse, but ofta nurse. So, that is an special area din, no? Na operating room nurse. Sa operating room ka, mag-work, mag-assist sa client. And since ofta ako, I am assisting surgeries on eye cases. So, mga eye cases siya. So, it is also masaya rin kasi after ng patient, maoperahan, lalo na pag yung nagkaroon sila ng cataract, no, for few years na malabo talaga yung paningin nila. Yung iba, super blurred, halos hindi na sila makakita. Then, right after the procedure, liliwanag na ang paningin nila at makikita ka na nila. Tapos sasabihin nila sa'yo, wow, ang ganda mo pala, ma'am. Tapos sasabihin mo ngayon, ma'am, parang hindi ka pa po tapos maoperahan kasi mali pa po yung nakikita mo, o di ba? So maganda rin, it is challenging. Okay? And then saan pa? ICU nurse. Yan. So marami talagang fields ang nursing. So maraming opportunity. Okay? So let us move on to the patient's Bill of Rights. So may rights ang pasyente. Senate Bill number 2371, or also known as an act proclaiming the rights and obligation of patients, providing a grievance, a mechanism thereof, and for other purposes. So number 1, equality health care means a quality service being received by the patient. So it must not be an unequal treatment between the rich and the poor. So you have to understand that. Na dapat same lang ang treatment mo whether your patient is rich or poor. They are both human beings that needs nursing care. Number 2, right to dignity. So the patient's dignity, culture, and value should be respected at all times. Okay. Ano ba yung dignity ni patient? Ano ba yung mga practices ni patient? You have to consider that too. Number 3, right to be informed of his rights and obligations as a patient. The patient has a right to know what is his or her rights as a patient. So ano ba yung mga rights niya as a patient? Right to choose his physician or health institution, not as being as a choosy patient, but the patient has the right to choose a physician. Ayaw niya ng physician na yun, ayaw niya sa institution na yun, and the health institution where he or she will be hospitalized, except for an emergency cases which the patient is merely unaware of his or her current conditions. Right to informed consent. The patient also has free will. Ano ba ibig sabihin ng informed consent? The attending physician will give the consequences on every personal decision. Will the client or the patient decide for himself? Of course, except again for emergency cases which the physicians do perform what is best for his patient. Ano ba informed consent? So, here, isiningit ko tong informed consent for you to understand what is an informed consent is. So, informed consent is an agreement by a client to accept a course of treatment or a procedure after being provided complete information, including the benefits, the risk of the treatment, alternatives to the treatment, and the prognosis if not treated by a healthcare provider. So, ibig sabihin, dapat isang papel ito actually. Common ito, halimbawa, for surgery si patient or merong ipe-perform na certain procedure kay client. So, kailangan mag-sign si client dito. Pero what happened? Nakita natin, it's the physician who will actually inform or provide information to the client. Pero what happened, no, sadly, sa hospitals, parang sign na lang and sign si client, not even reading the paper itself. Or, bihira ang merong nag-i-explain talaga. Okay? So, this is very important. Lumabas din ito sa mga exams, sa mga board exams. There are two types of informed consent. The express consent and the implied consent. So, express consent is in a form of oral or written. So, it is usually done when there are more invasive procedure or the greater the potential for the risk to the client, the greater the need for permission. So, like yung mga examples na sinabi ko sa inyo for surgery. Implied consent, it exists when the individual's non-verbal behavior indicates agreement. Example lang nito, vital signs taking, medical emergency, so implied consent ang gagamitin doon. So, there are general guidelines, okay, for the informed consent. These are the following. The diagnosis or condition that requires treatment, okay, so kailangan mo na informed consent. The purposes of the consent, what the client can expect to feel or experience, the intended benefits of the treatment, the possible risk or negative outcome of the treatment, the advantages and disadvantages of possible alternatives to the treatment, including no treatment. So, yun yung guidelines natin. There are three major elements naman of the consent. The consent must be given voluntary. So, voluntary lang dapat. There should be no coercion. The consent must be given by a client or individual with the capacity and competence to understand. Okay. The client or individual must be given enough information to be the ultimate decision maker. Exceptions. May mga exceptions tayo. Kapag minors, hindi siya yung magsasign, kundi yung parents. Unconscious or injured relatives or parent or immediate relatives dapat. People with mental illness. Sila yung mga group na may exceptions na hindi sila mismo ang magsasign ng consent. Accepted na sila yung pwedeng mag-sign ng consent for themselves. Minors. Ma'am, sabi mo kanina, hindi sila dapat ang parents. For the following cases, blood donations, treatment for mental health problem, treatment for reproductive health concerns, especially sexually transmitted disease, and pregnancy. So, pwede silang mag-consent for themselves. Minors who are married, pregnant, parents, members of the military or emancipated, or living on their own. So, you have to know this. Kasi ito lumalabas din to sa board exam. Okay? What is your role as a nurse in the informed consent? Actually, it is not your duty na magpaliwanag si patient about the yung kanina, yung mga guidelines, the possible, the risk, the advantages. So it is the duty of the physician. So your role here is as a witness. And the nurse signature confirms that the client gave consent voluntarily. So, kaya ka nandyan. Witness ka na voluntary na nag-sign si client. That the signature is authentic and that the client appears competent to give the consent. So, that is your role as a nurse. So, let us move on to the number 6, right to refuse diagnostic and medical treatment. So, may right din si patient. The patient also has a right to refuse medical treatment that is currently given unto him. And right to refuse participation in medical research so the patient cannot be used for experimentation in medical research. This will imply inhuman treatment to our co-human in flesh. Number 8, right to religious belief and assistance. The patient has the right to invite priest to confirm him if he is a Catholic. The patient has the right to invite pastor if he is a Christian, an imam if he is a Muslim. The patient has a right to refuse medical procedures that could affect his sacrilegious oath to his religion, like the Jehovah's Witness who refuse